peaceful and beautiful and physical and angry all at the same time.
Were you idiot, your mind would cave in and your heart would explode within your chest.
This is going to be a shame.
Here we go!
Let's go. We're back at it on a Tuesday in the TCA studio. Matt Robinson with you as always. What did it take? Less than 24 hours for a change of plans. We've had to reschedule with Nick Ashbourne, who I mentioned on the Monday morning show would be here later this week. I would say 20 minutes after I got that episode posted, we had to reschedule. So you will hear from Nick down the road. It will not be this week. But we are going to talk some Blue Jays with our buddy Arden Zwelling from Sportsnet. Also a little UFC talk with him a little later in that conversation. Ever since Sportsnet picked up the rights for the UFC, Arden's been covering that when he's not busy with baseball. And man, was he ever busy with baseball over the last couple of months, especially during the first couple rounds of the playoffs. He wasn't just doing the Jays. He'd be popping up at the Seattle Tigers game out in Seattle or, shit like that, just being asked to cover other big games along the way. So the guy put some miles on. We gave him a month or so to relax before we reached out to him there the other day and asked if he'd be willing to jump back on the show. And he seems recharged enough to have a conversation, so we'll do that in just a second. I want to remind you that later on this week, probably on Thursday morning, you'll hear from Angela Thompson from the Lake of Bays Brewing Company. We'll find out what they've got kicking around, new seasonals for the winter, and talk a little sports with her. So that's coming up a little bit later on this week. That should be a lot of fun. It always is. And, we're going to start to put together here some of our holiday programming, right, that we typically... we try and do one or two special things, and then along the way, sometimes when Rob's in studio, we'll just pre-record a segment that isn't time-sensitive. Like, I think this topic might be interesting. Let's just hit it and save it, and I can toss it into kind of a collage episode midway through the holidays, so we don't have to be on the mic quite as often, as I said, during the Christmas break. And then after we go ahead and do all that, I usually find myself wanting to record anyway once the World Juniors get going. It's difficult to find people who want to jump on with you during that time of year, and I hesitate to ask people at that time of year, but I always find that I end up overdoing it on the amount of stuff we pre-record, because I do end up doing a show or two throughout the World Juniors anyway. It's only a couple of days long, the tournament every year, and there's always a ton to talk about and a ton of content from it, and so you sort of take advantage when you can. So anyway, look forward to some of that stuff coming up here throughout December and into early January. We'll keep it going around here. We don't disappear, just like in the summer. You guys know how it goes. We'll keep the new stuff coming for you. But as I said, we're talking to Arden Zwelling from Sportsnet and the At the Letters podcast today. Let's get into it right now on Tall Can Audio. Let's get right into it. Guy, we haven't spoken to, I don't think, since the spring. Arden Zwelling from Sportsnet and the At the Letters podcast is back. What's happening, man?
Hey, not bad. I like these kind of biannual check-ins, before and after the season. It's good.
Well, I know how busy they keep you during the season, so I try to leave you alone a little bit. Well, man, what was the we're going to bounce all over the place here a little bit. I want to talk to you about the fight game a little later on as well, but the Blue Jays season in general, man, especially that last little bit, you were obviously popping up on our TVs at the Blue Jays game, and the next night I'd turn on, you'd be in Seattle or something, that you were bouncing all over the place during the playoffs. What was that like, man?
Oh, it was madness. It was just unbelievable. It was, a month that felt like a week and also a year, if that makes sense, right? Like, it felt like it was going a mile a minute, but it also was taking forever. It was unlike anything any of us have experienced since '93, obviously. And it was interesting being in the bubble of it on the road with the team and, being at the Rogers Center for like 14 hours a day or whatever, because you didn't necessarily get that sense of how much it had taken over the city, the province, and the country. And then you would kind of pull out every so often and realize, oh man, like, everybody in the country is invested in this right now. There are, the audiences obviously were up over 10 million, but it felt like the entire population of Canada was just living and dying with the Blue Jays. So just to get to be a part of it in the way that I did, that was really, really special.
When did you kind of wrap your own arms around the idea that might be the way things play out? Like, they kind of had this so-so start. And then it started to heat up a little bit in June or maybe in late May. For a lot of us, myself included, I think it was sort of around that Canada Day series with the Yankees where you're like, oh, wow, like they might take a run at this. And it continued to build and momentum snowballs from there. And I'm just sort of curious, as the season went along, when did it sort of dawn on you that this team might be better than we thought they were?
Over the second half, the way that things were breaking with the division and just with how well the Blue Jays were playing and just like how clearly the cohesiveness and the chemistry and the togetherness that they had in the clubhouse was spilling over onto the field and impacting how well they were playing. It really kind of became clear over the second half, like, okay, this is definitely going to be a postseason team. And then it became, hey, they've got a really good chance of winning their division right now. And then it became, hey, they have a really good chance of getting a bye. And then once they secured those three things, you go into the postseason and you realize it's a bit of a crapshoot. So heading into October, I didn't necessarily think this was going to be a team that would play 7 games of a World Series. I thought they were good enough to get to the CS, certainly, but you're also aware that it's baseball and crazy things happen. Sure. So even in a 5-game series against the New York Yankees, if the Yankees had come out of that having won 4 or 5, in 4 or 5 games, I don't think anybody would have been shocked. I don't think anybody should have been shocked that the Blue Jays won it either. And then you can say the same thing for the CS. You just kind of go in eyes open and understanding that you're dealing with like a 52 to 48 odds in either direction here every night that they go out there. So things kept going right for the Blue Jays, and they kept finding ways to sort of get through in the most critical moments and to continue to play on up until obviously Game 7 when they couldn't find that swing that they needed.
It's true. That is what happened. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. I guess it was bound to come up. When you referenced there a minute ago what a tight-knit group this was, one of the things I like about listening to you on your podcast and some of your work is I think a little bit like myself, you're sometimes kind of skeptical about the intangibles. You seem to focus on the numbers a little more and how much room for variation there can be in different things. But I'm curious, like everyone has talked about that with this team, how tight-knit group they were and what a team this was. How real do you think that kind of thing is? Like you mentioned it as part of the reason things went so well for them. How does, in your opinion, that translate onto the field?
Yeah, it's hard to incorporate it into analysis because it's hard to show evidence for. Whereas when it's production or something that you can quantify, you can actually you can make a claim about a team or about a player and show evidence based on statistics. Mm-hmm. And I feel a lot more confident making those claims than, oh, they have the desire to win, or sure. Oh, they have the secret sauce, or what, anything kind of like just ethereal like that. Particularly when it comes to team chemistry, because I'm not in the clubhouse all the time, and I'm not on the planes and in the hotels and at the dinners and in the dugout with them. As media, we're in the clubhouse for an hour a day, and with being a part of the broadcast, you get to be a bit closer to the players just before and after the game, and but you don't ever think that you really know what's going on. You've got a sense, and you've got good relationships with guys, and you observe things and you learn things, and people who you've built relationships with and who trust you will tell you things, but you never truly know. And you can never really say to the audience, here is X, Y, and Z that tells you why this team has amazing chemistry. But this is all a roundabout way of saying it just became hard to deny at a certain point. I think for fans, the reason why they connected with this team so much was because it was just impossible to be cynical about them. Because the way that they played for one another and supported one another and picked one another up, like it just came through the television, and it touched every single person that not only was in attendance, but also who was watching at home and seeing the dugout reactions. And there was just, an authenticity to it, even in the comments after games, and the emotion that you saw from players and how much they cared, not just about the outcome and winning or losing, but about one another and about each other's success. It's not always the case. And I think we've seen that in a number of sports with a number of teams. So it was kind of like you were saying earlier with, when did you realize that this team could play, well enough to win a World Series? I don't know that there was a moment. It just kind of became, as time went on, it just kind of became more and more clear and revealed itself more and more. And so that was the same with the clubhouse, with the chemistry, the togetherness, and the bond that these guys had. Eventually, you just couldn't deny it. It was very, very real.
Let me step back then into something a little more statistical based so we can both be a little more comfortable. One of the things I think in past years that has made fans crazy was this concept that the Jays would be banking on some level of internal growth. And sometimes that feels like an excuse for not doing more in the offseason, and we really think there's more in the clubhouse. And this year, they turned out to be correct. There was a lot more in the clubhouse. There was a lot of guys who took a big step forward. And I wonder to what extent you and the front office, and I imagine they won't consult with you, but what do I know, expect that this year you might actually have to bank for a little internal regression and going a little bit the other way. Can we really expect George Springer? And this is obviously outside of the idea that I still assume they'll go out and get another bat in free agency and things like that. But with the guys that are in the clubhouse now, can we really expect George Springer to do that again another year older? I don't expect Nathan Lucas is going back to the minors, but does he take a little bit of a step back? Ernie Clement is setting records for playoff batting average and things like that I don't know that anyone thought was in him. To what degree do you think they have to allow for at least a bit of a step back from some of these guys?
Yeah, it's going to be individual and it's going to be case by case, but obviously there's no player who just repeats their production, whether good or bad, year to year. Like there was who was that one player at the A's a number of years ago, hit like 252 every season for 5 or 6 straight years. You remember who I'm talking about?
Vaguely, but I don't have the name.
Yeah, I forget the name off the top of my head, but he was like the one exception where he just every year over a substantial sample, for some reason, he hit 252 every year. But it seems like every other player has these natural ups and downs. And you can just look at like George Springer's career with the Blue Jays as a pretty good example of that. When he first came over, he was incredible when he was on the field. Unfortunately, he had issues, with his quad and with his midsection and things that sort of kept him off the field. But when he was on it, he was tremendous. And then when he was healthy in recent years, he wasn't quite as productive. And then this past season, you saw it all come together where he was on the field every day and he looked like, a guy who got down ballot MVP votes, which is what he was. So it's impossible to say what that's going to look like next year. But I think the Blue Jays are always baking in either positive or negative regression from players based on what they've done the year prior. That's why they use projection systems and that's why they use models. But I think that they would also say that they got what they got out of Ernie Clement and out of Nathan Lucas and out of George Springer as well, based on kind of the whole of the roster construction, based on the players that they put around them, how the lineup complemented one another, the blend of on-base contact and power. I think that you saw that really come together for the Blue Jays last season. I feel like they built the roster that they had been talking about wanting to build for years and years and years, where all the puzzle pieces just fit really well together. And the sum was greater than the whole of the parts. Whereas for a number of years, the sum was less than the whole of the parts, and it was kind of baffling. And none of us could figure out why. So to the extent that they can recreate that effect next year, they could maybe mitigate some of that inevitable regression that they will experience. But the team will be different next year. It'll be a different lineup, and there will be different levels of health for certain guys. And certain things are going to work better than they did this year, and certain things aren't going to work as well as it did last year. Ultimately, it'll come down to your best players being your best players and you having enough depth to withstand when things don't go your way, whether that's injury or underperformance.
They do end up in the playoffs. It continues to build. They do obviously get the bye, as you referenced there. I'm sort of curious from the media side of things, what it was like for you and how much round over round, are you noticing more national media rolling in, more not just sports media rolling in? Now you've got, Toronto news stations are here, and I don't know, maybe international outlets, and certainly in the World Series, the Japanese component. What is it like for you as the playoffs ramp up, and suddenly I'm sure it's a little more crowded around the bowels of the Rogers Center?
Yeah, you notice it from a personal space standpoint for the most part, where as each round goes on, you have less and less room to operate, not only in the clubhouse, but even just on the field. Before games, when we're doing the pregame show, during the World Series, I mean, you've got huge sets, television sets on either side of you, and you can't really, if you want to kind of walk to the right or the left, you need to make sure you're not walking through anybody's shot. You have to have some real field awareness of just where you're stepping, where you're going. Whereas in the DS, a lot more room to sort of wander around and stretch your legs. So, it definitely is. It's exactly as you'd expect. Like, it just amplifies round after round. And then you get to the World Series where, like, to your point, it's not only a ton of everybody in the Toronto media, and it's not only national baseball media, but it's also Japan. Sure. It's also, the Otani and Yamamoto and Sasaki media, which is like an entire contingent of hundreds of people on their own. So it does become quite a zoo as things go on. But that's, it's interesting. We said a lot that Toronto was going back to the World Series, but really the World Series came to Toronto, and Rogers Center just housed, this enormous event, and Pharrell and all of his backup singers and dancers and things, and all of these grand ceremonies, and having in-game concerts with Jonas Brothers and things. Like, the World Series came to Toronto, and it really is a spectacle and an event in and of itself. It was interesting to see that just kind of play out in this city, because it has become so much more grand and ostentatious than it was in 1993 when it was last year.
Yeah, there was a lot of surprises, a lot of shocking moments in that World Series. Having the Jonas Brothers arrive was certainly on that list for me. I did not see that coming.
I only saw it in the press release before the game. I didn't know how it was going to play out in the game. I think they probably could have done that a little bit better, a little bit more tactfully. But, that's someone else's job, not mine.
100%. The Jays didn't waste any time trying to maintain momentum and excitement in the fan base. They have sort of jumped the line on free agency, gone out and brought in a really big name in Dylan Cease. What did you think, man, first of all, of the timing and the move that they made, and then obviously of the player specifically?
Yeah, it's really interesting, the timing of this offseason. We're used to these winters where we're kind of waiting around for the Blue Jays to do their business. And then ultimately in December, they pull off like a Varsho trade, or in January, they sign a George Springer. Like, these things, usually they do kind of their small business first and the big stuff later. And I feel like this year you've kind of got the inverse, where you've got the big stuff happening first and the small stuff happening later. The timing, like, as it comes to Dylan, and I'm talking about Shane Bieber as well,
yeah,
who opted in, right? So basically, like, the Blue Jays took care of their starting pitching. Like, they just kind of checked off that box
for sure
before we even got into the month of December, which is exceptional. But the Bieber thing, a bit of that is just like the structure of the offseason and when those options get declared. But for Cease, I think the timing, it tells you a few things. It tells you how much the Blue Jays coveted Dylan Cease, because they clearly were not messing around. Like, they moved decisively and aggressively and made him an offer that clearly he and his agent felt was better than anything he was going to get by waiting around.
That's an agent that likes to wait too, right? He pushes his guys to wait it out. So
absolutely, yeah. Scott Boras is never advising his players to take early offers, because the longer the offseason goes, this can work both ways, but teams can get more desperate, or injuries can happen. Other names can come off the board. There could be people who finish second for Framber Valdez or Michael King, who end up entering the Cease market who weren't there before. So clearly this was an offer that was extremely compelling. And look, when you spend $200 million on a starting pitcher, that's something that's only happened like 8 or 9 times in the history of the sport. Right. So that that is a very strong offer. But I think it also speaks to how the Blue Jays were able to sell Dylan Cease on what his life would be like in Toronto and Dunedin over the next 7 years. Like, it is a big decision for him and his family to make this kind of commitment and to say, I am going to be a Blue Jay for this length of time. This is clearly the biggest contract he's going to sign in his life. So it's not a small decision. And I think it speaks to just the sales job and the recruiting effort the Blue Jays were able to do, that he came to such a quick conclusion that Toronto was the place for him. And that comes down to not only what life's going to be like for him at the ballpark and the players who he's going to be teammates with and the staff who he's going to be working with and everything behind the scenes, but it's also just what life's going to be like for him in the city of Toronto and what life's going to be like for him in Dunedin for 6 to 8 weeks before the season, and what kind of supports will be in place for families, and if he's ever going to have kids in Toronto, like what their lives would be like as they're growing up north of the border. These are all factors, and these are all things that are really important to professionals when they're making a commitment like this. And clearly the Blue Jays did a really good job of just telling him on what the environment was going to be like in Toronto for him to be, to feel as comfortable as he was moving as quickly as he did in free agency, which is, to say nothing of 200 million reasons why it also made sense for him to do that.
Do you like the fit specifically? Because I think for a lot of people, there's a lot to like about Dylan Cease, but if you want to look under the hood, there's always little things you can pick at with any pitcher. But I think the one thing that a lot of fans have grabbed onto here fairly quickly is the idea that the Padres' defense behind him was not particularly good, and that ERA should come down a little bit just based on nothing more than being dropped into a much better defensive team like the Blue Jays. Do you like the fit with this player specifically?
Well, yeah, I think absolutely. Like, that's a clear upside, is coming over and having better defense behind him and also a better catcher to throw to.
Sure.
I think Alejandro Kirk's elite pitch framing should help him get a lot more of those borderline strikes. And I'm sure the Blue Jays are hoping that'll help decrease the walk rate and up the pitch efficiency and allow him to get a bit deeper into games. I think the upsides of Cease are really, really big upsides. When you talk about durability, which is as good as anybody in the sport, velocity, as good as any starter in the sport, and strikeout ability, which is elite, as good as anybody in the sport. So you want to bet on a guy that has those three things going for him. I think the downsides obviously have been just a lack of a consistent good third pitch to go with his fastball and slider, which are both elite. The struggles we've seen against lefties, the walk issues, obviously, and control issues, the fact that he hasn't been able to get particularly deep into starts because he throws so many pitches per inning. So it's really a bet that the Blue Jays can help him tap into the upside that he's had trouble accessing consistently. Because I think anybody in baseball will tell you there is dominant ace-level stuff here. And if you are able to be this durable, throw this hard, strike out this many guys, if you can put it together and you can stop walking dudes and you can get through innings quicker, you could be a Cy Young winner. So really, it's up to the Blue Jays to help Cease just reach that next level that he hasn't been able to get to with prior organizations. And it's not like those other organizations weren't trying to help him do that.
Right.
It's not like they were telling him, hey, you should walk more guys. They were clearly trying to get him in the zone. They were clearly trying to get him to develop a third pitch for lefties. So the Blue Jays are going to have some new ideas and some new approaches. And some new ways just to get him to get to where he hasn't been able to get to yet. We'll see. I think it's pretty clear the Blue Jays are confident they'll be able to help him with that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have guaranteed this amount of money to him over this amount of time. But there really is a bet on the Blue Jays coaching staff and everybody in their pitching group for being able to bring new ideas to Dylan Cease, and then a bet on him to have the buy-in and the work ethic and the desire and motivation to want to get the most out of himself and be open-minded to trying new things and different approaches and doing what is necessary in order to really fulfill the potential that is so obviously there.
What do you make of the idea that us fans are all still waiting on a bat? And, I think all the insiders and the talking heads are suggesting that the Blue Jays will be in the market still for a big bat. Bo is out there. I think a lot of fans would like to see that guy back. There's also been talk of Kyle Tucker. I don't know how real that would be. But based on the way this team is built, like even the Bo thing would probably have to come with an understanding that we need you to play second now. Like, we've avoided this topic for a long time, but we have to talk about this if you're coming back. Like, based on the way this team is built and the positional needs and restraints that they have, is there a fit out there that you would be looking at ahead of some of the other names?
So I think the Blue Jays will obviously stay involved in those markets for Bichette and Tucker. I mean, they see what we all see, and they're obviously motivated to add a bat this winter. I just don't think that you're going to see them like jump the market or be quite as aggressive as they were with Cease. I think that they'll let things play out and let things develop, see how stuff crystallizes. And I think part of that is just due to there being more depth to just the position player market, and there being more avenues Blue Jays can take and more ways they can build a successful offense. When it came to starting pitchers, it was essentially Dylan Cease, Framber Valdez, and then a massive drop-off to like Ranger Suarez and Michael King. So, I would speculate that some of the character concerns with Framber Valdez turned the Blue Jays off from wanting to sign him. Yep. And so once you eliminate him, it's like, okay, it's Dylan Cease or bust. This is the drop-off.
Throw your money on the table, go get it done, right?
Exactly. There was a real scarcity of just high-level starting pitching. So the Blue Jays went out and they got that done. There's not as much of a scarcity on the position player side. It doesn't have to be a Bichette return. It doesn't have to be getting a Kyle Tucker. Alex Bregman would look pretty good on the Blue Jays. Cody Bellinger would look pretty good on the Blue Jays. So there are other options there, and the Blue Jays can allow things to kind of play out. So I think they'll let those markets kind of crystallize. They'll obviously be communicating with Bichette and Tucker about like, hey, here's where we see the value, or here's where we would begin a negotiation. And obviously there's room to kind of move up from there or look at different structures and try to come to something that both sides find agreeable. But I don't think the Blue Jays are going to blow anybody away on the position player side. They'll let things develop. Trust the players want to play in Toronto, which we've seen is clear. Trust that they will come back to the Blue Jays if they have a good offer somewhere else and say, hey, here's what we've got. We're going to move on it soon. Do you want to get involved? And at that point, the Blue Jays can kind of make a decision of whether they want to push for that player or whether they feel the value isn't there and they walk away and pursue someone else. I think the good news on the position player side is that there's a lot of options and a lot of ways the Blue Jays can go, so they don't have to feel like they're backed into a corner. If Kyle Tucker gets like a New York Yankees offer that is through the roof, they can just let the Yankees sign him. I heard the Yankees don't make money.
I've heard that recently.
Yeah, it's so hard owning the Yankees. So the Blue Jays can just let the market kind of play out the way it does. It seems like every year, Matt, we come to the end of the winter and there's somebody taking one of these like short-term pillow deals. Like Alex Bregman did it last year. We saw Cody Bellinger do it as well. Mm-hmm. That's not a terrible outcome for the Blue Jays. Like if they could sign Alex Bregman to what he got from the Red Sox last year, short-term, high AAV, and maybe he's only around for a year or two, That's fine. You just get his prime and you don't have to, deal with the decline later on in a long
the Jays have proof of concept there, right? Like having Marcus Semien come in and have like an all-timer of a season worked out pretty well, right?
100%. So that's another example of why it can be prudent to have a bit of patience when it comes to position players in this market. So yeah, don't expect the Blue Jays to jump it like they did with Cease.
One of the things that, it's going to be a really interesting offseason, but I want to switch over to talk a little UFC with you for a moment. I know that's been added to your portfolio since Sportsnet has grabbed the rights, and south of the border, we have seen those rights move to Paramount Plus, and the first big move under that umbrella has been to see the main cards move from 10 o'clock to 9 o'clock. As a rapidly aging gentleman myself, I'm more than fine with that news. But did it surprise you at all? Because there's been a lot of talk about this for a while, that the West Coast didn't want main cards starting, at 6 p.m. or whatever it would be. It feels like this is Paramount's first flex on this one particular issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. It surprised me because the UFC has been so stubborn in the past. Like that, I think a number of years ago they tried like one card that began at 9. And they decided after that sample of one, nope, we're not doing it. It's just not for us. I feel like I don't know, I'm speculating, but I think they might have felt that like the their audience was almost like trained to just show up at 10 o'clock on Saturday nights.
Sure,
like they just had that familiarity and that kind of Pavlovian response of it's 10 p.m., time to order the pay-per-view. So I wonder if that kind of played into it as well. I think that just moving away from the pay-per-view model opens it up to all kinds of creativity, right? Like, do you have to do this sort of 3-tier structure of your card, or you've got your early prelims or prelims in your main card? Mm-hmm. Could you just do like a 10-fight card and it's all just the card? Like, there's no separation. Because why do you need to have that separation anymore if there's no more pay-per-view?
Right.
So maybe we no longer have these sort of bloated like 13, 14 fight cards that go on forever. Maybe it's only 8 fights. Maybe that by just sort of concentrating things a little bit, that actually increases the quality of the product. And it means that you're not kind of sitting through a prelim fight between 2 guys you never heard of, like where it's just every fight on the card is interesting and is name value. So I'll be interested to see just how they kind of play around with stuff and experiment. But I think you're right. I think probably Paramount had to come to the UFC and say, hey, we want to try this, because the UFC has been extremely stubborn in the past to move off of that 10 o'clock start time.
And like, if you get a 5-fight main card and all of them go the distance and all of, like, it's 1:30, 2 in the morning sometimes by the time these are wrapping up, man. It can be a tough watch even for your hardcore fans. I did just see, I guess it was last week, they announced that the first event of 2026 will feature the return of Amanda Nunes to face Kayla Harrison. It's the fight game, so never say never when it comes to retirements and these sorts of things. But were you surprised to see her come back? This is a tough fight for her. Her legacy was locked in stone. I was a little surprised she was willing to come back in and take this.
Yeah, it had been rumored for so long that I just sort of accepted that it was going to happen. Obviously, nothing's finished until it's finished. I think it's great for the women's side of the UFC, which had a bit of a tough year this past year and has like lost a lot of stars over the last several years and hasn't necessarily replaced them. And you look at, the fight between Zhang Wei Li and Valentina Shevchenko a couple of weeks ago. I mean, that was like the best women's fight you can make in the sport right now. And it was one-sided domination. Yeah. It just wasn't that competitive. So getting obviously super talented women and Amanda Nunes and Kayla Harrison in the octagon is big, but also just like big personalities. And, as much as it's an athletic pursuit, this is also the entertainment business, and it also helps to be able to sell fights and to be able to make things really interesting for a more casual fan base, a more broad fan base, rather than the diehards just like you and I, which is how you really grow the sport and you get more money involved and more people interested, and you end up finding more stars down the road and more people who can emerge and kind of hopefully get women's MMA out of a bit of the recession that's been over the last couple of years after like the really dynamic, high star power, high competitiveness era that we saw from, maybe 2010 through 2020.
Sure.
It feels like the last few years, things have been in a little bit of a lull.
They've put that fight, and it is a title fight, at the co-main. That got people a little upset last week because the main event is an interim title fight that's lightweight. Does that kind of stuff bug you? Do you care about that? Or it does?
I don't understand it.
Yeah.
It doesn't drive me nuts. I'm going to watch both fights anyway.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't necessarily understand it, honestly. It's like it's an interim fight between Justin Gaethje and Paddy Pimblett. It's an interesting fight, but I mean, it's just nowhere near as big of a fight as Kayla Harrison and Amanda Nunes. I don't understand it. I'm sure at some point Dana White will be asked and we'll get a totally unsatisfying answer. But, I don't get it, but it's not something that I'm ranting and raving about.
The last thing for you then, they have now sort of booked out through the end of January. They're going to Australia actually the week after the card we're talking about. But is there anything sort of between now and then and those cards that one fight in particular that really got your attention that you're really looking forward to coming up here?
Oh boy, they haven't announced that much stuff, right?
Yeah.
For 2026. So I would just have to look at the card coming up this weekend where, you've got Merab Dvalishvili trying to defend his belt a fourth time in a year. That's wild.
It is.
That's never happened before for starters, but also for it to be Mirab doing it, who has like the most high-paced, high-volume, high-output style ever, and fights long fights, like 3, 4, 5 round fights. It's not like he's getting first round knockouts or submissions and not taking any damage. Like, he's in bangers all the time. And his whole style is just predicated on absurd cardio and volume and throwing insane amounts of strikes and takedowns at his opponents. Like the last time he faced Peter Yan, who he's going to face this weekend, he attempted like 49 takedowns. So for him to be the guy who is trying to defend 4 times in a year for the first time in UFC history is just kind of wild. Like, it's sort of unbelievable. It's like, of course he's the guy, but also it is pretty unbelievable that he is the guy doing it. So, I would look at this weekend with that fight. And then, Alexandre Pantoja and Joshua Van. I mean, Van's super game and super exciting. I wonder if it's a little too early for him. He's just 24. I kind of think Kyoji Hiraguchi might be the next guy to challenge Pantoja. And maybe that's the fight that they make after this one if Pantoja gets through Van. But, Pantoja's he's getting to Demetrius Johnson level here of flyweight dominance. So whenever there's somebody who is stringing together that many defenses in a row, fighting the most dangerous dudes every time out, it's exciting and historic and interesting to watch that guy try to navigate that and try to just keep up the quality of appearance that you need when you're getting everybody's best fight every time out. So, between now, from what we know coming up, I guess this weekend's card's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Are they sending you on the road for this one, or?
No.
I
would imagine maybe the January one,
right.
But not this weekend.
Okay. Well, that's okay. You've been on the road quite enough, I'm sure, for a little while. Arden, I always appreciate the time, man, and no doubt I will come calling again in the spring for the biannual visits. But
that's right.
Thanks so much, man, for making the time. I always appreciate it.
Yeah, we'll set it all up in the spring. I'm looking forward to it, man. Thanks, Matt.
Okay. Always enjoy talking to Arden, and it's cool for me now, especially. I always enjoyed talking baseball with the guy. I enjoy his perspective. I did reference there during the episode that he and I have sort of a similar aversion to overreacting or overinvesting in some of the things that can't be proven, some of your leadership factors or your gritty factor. And I don't argue that those are real things that do exist, but I think because we can't properly quantify them, they get overemphasized sometimes. And so for me, it's refreshing to listen to Arden on his podcast or watch him on TV, read his work, whatever it might be, and know that he's going to come at it from a similar perspective, or at least a perspective that I appreciate. So always have enjoyed that. But now that he's on the UFC beat for Sportsnet, it's hard to find. We don't have a lot. I shouldn't say it's hard to find. There are lots of qualified MMA journalists out there. We just haven't made friends with that many of them yet. So it's kind of cool for me that one of our longtime friends of the show has now landed in that world anyway. And he's been a longtime fan of the sport, but he's got some access now covering it and being credentialed for Sportsnet. So always enjoy talking a little bit of the fight game with him. But that's where we'll wrap this one up for today. As I said off the top, you can look forward to hearing from Angela Thompson on Thursday morning from the Lake of Bays Brewing Company. And we'll talk some beer. We'll talk some sports with her. We'll see what's topical in the moment. And Nick Ashbourne to come down the road. Other holiday specials that you're used to here around TCA still to come as well. And we'll get some more things banged out here before everybody goes their own way for the holiday season. So lots of good stuff to come. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast wherever you're hearing me right now so you don't miss any of that. And give us a follow on social media at Tall Can Audio. That's going to do it for today. My name is Matt Robinson. Thanks for listening.
I thought it generally sucked. I didn't think it was a specific suck. I thought it was like an all-encompassing type of suck. So, we're going to try and rectify that. But for right now, I'm going to be pretty pissed about it.